All right. I'm struggling, have been struggling to find out what's important, what can be changed, what can't be changed, what has to function without destroying the looks too much. Or can you get form and function? So oddly, the shape of the door angle, if you look at the back of the front cowl there, not the door, is at 4.5 degrees. And what it does, it kicks, as you can see by the angle of the door there, what it does, this is at 4.5 degrees, the radius here, from this point down to the bottom there, the average is 4.5 degrees, and that the windscreen and the side windows lean out at 0.5 degree. So, but the grille, each side of the grille here is 3 degrees off centre. So it actually twists in. Now this is nothing uncommon. In fact, a 1932 Ford, the grille is basically upside down and is wider at the bottom and then twists so that the cabin is narrow at the bottom. So it gets this great big twist in it. And so it's not uniform in that at all. Yet everyone says that's the most beautiful form there is. To me, that twist looks unusual. Now that I've said it, people go, oh crap, I've never noticed that before. Now I can't get it out of my head. Maybe. Anyway, so logic speaking would be to match the grille angle into the doors. So tilting that out 1.5 degrees makes the side of the windscreen lean in 1 degree, which I prefer than leaning out, because that's the way the coupes are often done. I just think it looks better, and as you can see, there's a massive, all cars lean in a heap by comparison. And that's even without changing the reference, the angle difference that's naturally in the door. But if you start tilting just the door and not the door skin, the glass will literally hit at the bottom of its travel, the outside of the door. Right, this is what's hard working on very old cars. I thought the truck was bad, but this is way worse. So what I'm trying to establish is make a template for the curve of the outside of the door. And so, because the door skins themselves are quite distorted and the wooden frame had rotted out, but in the front of the door only, that I've got pieces of so far, and there's probably one at the back, I haven't found that, there's one steel plate, and this is the window channel attached to that. So I'm thinking, well, that's a good template to work off, because it doesn't really matter what the door skin is, because the door skin, because there's one still attached on the other side, follows that curve. So I made my template to suit that, and I was comparing that to the shape of a cow which this butts against, and I'm thinking, that's weird, it's measuring up differently. So I took the front of the cow support out, which is this piece here, and it's a different curve. So this is how much difference the curve is between the cow and the door. As you can see, how much that actually adds up to in the end. So in one way, if I follow the cow shape, I get a little bit more room for the windows and that sort of thing. So I'll probably base the decision on which one to follow between the two of them. But this is what you constantly face when you're working with such old vehicles. It's not just the damage. I mean, this hasn't changed shape. It's been cut that way, punched out of the factory, yet they've punched them out at two different radiuses. Now, that's what I have trouble understanding in this day and age, but in that time, yep, close enough was good enough. Well, the saga of trying to pick a curve for the bottom half of the door. Now, the top half is quite consistent, and that's not the problem. It's the bottom half where I'm getting different readings from the cowl, doesn't matter if it's the front or rear of the cowl, and the door, that they're different. So I'm trying to think, well, what would be better? Well, I end up going with something not as the cowl. I'm thinking, well, why not follow the grill for the lower half of the door? So I've just cut this curve here. It wasn't that much different, and actually this curve here is the same as the doors and the rest of the body is in a horizontal plane. So it makes much more sense to at least have a curve that is shared rather than three different ones that there is now. So that gives you an idea of what it's sort of a bit hard to see on this angle, but anyway, you saw it on there. I'm picking a curve. Where do you pick the curve from? Yeah, well, you've got to pick it from somewhere. So that's what I've done. Pick the grill. And for those who haven't seen it, and probably one of the reasons why my wife wanted a girl's name, well, woman's name, this is called the Goddess. Unfortunately, my spare grill that came with it, and what I'll make there, take the extra bars. Actually, this one is in way better condition than the other one, so vice versa. I'll take the spare bars when I widen this grill. The extra 2 bars each side will come from this grill. So, I mean, that's going to be hard to add some, but you add it right at the peak there, where it's at its highest point, and do it that way. Anyway, that's a different story. But here's the Goddess. You can sort of make it up. I'll see if I can, I know there's a restored one online as an information thing, so I can show you what it is. But that's called the Goddess. So I couldn't find the name of it. That's what we tried for first, and we're going to name it after that. No, the only reference we could find was Goddess. And there's a version, this one's not it, there's a version, I don't know if it's a year earlier, where they actually have WO in the bottom of this for Willis, as you should correctly say it, Overland. Yes, there'll be an argument. Go look it up, for goodness sakes, and you'll see that it's named after John Willis. Right, so what I've got here is, well, it's basically a door skin. There is no frame. So I wanted to see what it looked like. So here's the back door, and this is the curve as it was before I did anything. So this here, this curve is a lot steeper, and it was basically what caused this to be at 4 degrees rather than the grill's 2.5 degrees. So it's 1.5 degrees as steeper in relation to to the top. So anyway, so greater curvature there. So there's your back door. So what I quickly did is I altered this front door to the new template. So this is the opposite template, and you can see here that this follows it now. So simply by stretching the lip along the edge here from the belt line down, nothing's been changed in the top half. It shows you the curve. So there's definitely, it's not like it's some slab-sided flat. You can see there's still quite a bit of curve there. As you can see in here, but this is what it was before, and it was much steeper than the grill. As you can see, the grill there. So that's got the 2.5 degrees off vertical, and this was the doors at 4 degrees off vertical to what the door is now at also 2.5 degrees, hence the 2.5 degrees there. So there you go. Not sure why I'm doing that, but anyway, I thought I'd show you. I thought the best way to show all the differences made to the crown of the doors to match the grille, what that actually means in practice. So what I've done is this back edge of this door, I have shaped that to fit the new template, and the back door has not been altered. So as you can see here, nothing is being changed from the belt line up, but you can see the lack of the difference in the crown between the two. So it doesn't tuck in as much as it did before, and you can see that there. So you can see there's still plenty of crown in there. You have to ignore the opposite side. There's just too much damage around that hinge area for me to flatten that out enough. But it gives you an idea, at least, what has happened to the overall appearance. So it's much more like the 33 models than the 32 models, both in Ford wheelies, etc. So yeah, it was good to see a visual change between the two. I don't know if this angle shows anything more, but you can see it there tucks in, which means because I had a maximum I could go inwards here in relation to the dash here, I've been able to utilise as much of that tuck that I wanted without making the top sit out more away from, making it even wider than what I could fit in there. So yeah, it's been a success. Alright, what I'm establishing here is the arc or radius of the panels as they lay flat. Now generally on older vehicles they go in, back out, and you get this sort of double hump. Now rather than filling everything up with body filler like you see in tombstoning it, it's not the look I'm going for, but I have the opportunity to manufacture into the frame this arc so it'll sit nice and flat right across there, and with a consistent arc. There we go. So because that will influence the depth that the center of the doors sitting here will be in relationship to the dead flat here. So for instance, this is got a 2-inch difference between this point and the ground flat and that edge there. So I know I have to bring this out 2 inches to get that natural flowing arc. So the best way to do it is just literally lay a ruler on it and it should take the arc naturally. There's no point going, oh, it sits flat now. When you push it flat, you need the ends down. I'll lay this one a bit flat and you might be able to see better, but this is just the weight of the ruler just laying naturally over there, where before, when I was a little bit low, it would literally go down and come back up again and wouldn't touch the ruler in those places. So I know now what sort of arc I need to know to do over that distance. Of course, I've got to transpose that into here and compare the distances and work out the arc of how much I've got to move out. So there's a lot more to, oh, just slap something on and you'll be fine sort of situation. When you're building a door frame from scratch, you've got to take all these things into account. So I've got to make sure that at this exact distance from there over to here, that I lay that out between here and where the door will finish, and make sure that in the centre line, because these windows are actually identical in length on the Willys, so that is the centre line from here up, not the door seal down here, but from here up. That is actually the centre line. So once I establish where this A pillar is going to end up versus where the it's going to finish, then I can work out that same arc. So I'll lay out this distance. Yes, I'm getting photobombed again. And make sure that that arc stays in there. All right. I've just tried the sweep. That curve matches this curve here exactly. Now I've got fixed points. Now this is where the A pillar is going to go, and that's where, line that up with that mark there, that's it there. When I've got the minimum distance from the side of the dash to this pillar, and the angles are all exactly as in this way, exactly what's required, that's where that point ends up. So I've got all that fixed. This is the shape, curvature that the door is going to take. All right, so that's the outside camber there. Now the other fixed point is this structure here. This is where, just inside here is the rear seat belt, inertia reel and everything sits, and I want to keep that structure, which has the flip forward front seats, and it's got anchorages for the centre seat belts. Actually, I don't think, yes. And there's also an inertia reel that sits for the centre person in there. That's right. That's where that goes. So there's all that sort of structure here that I'd really like to keep, and that will tie into the frame, making it part of the unibody from, at least from there back. So also it acts as the bracing for the shock absorber and the coil springs and everything that sits out the back here. So if I keep this curve exactly as it is, that's what the body line represents, and that is just the body line, not the running board. The problem is it's end up so fat here, there'll be very little running board left. So it looks a bit odd, and you can see how much it tucks in here. Look at that. This imaginary line, well, this hard line is my imaginary, will be sitting up here and actually plows through the back of here and across this corner. And I was talking with my wife, and it's really too steep. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the longer the vehicle, the shallower that curve is. And when I compare this to, say, the 300C, not 300C, the SRT8, the 300, this is a way steeper curve than that. So thinking of changing, not only about changing the curve so this way, which is actually easy, this way is a little bit harder, because this window sill here is what locks that curve in place. There's also a curve, a shallower curve in the top there. As you can see here, it's fatter than it is there. So it's thin there, and that shows the curve there. That curve just in the top part of there is still steeper than what's on the SRT donor. I'm not trying to make it like the SRT donor. I think that's too flat. That's a modern car. But I think this curve is too great for an extended sedan or limousine length. I've spent a whole day making those sweeps, probably nearly 2 for the inner and outer, because it was mainly done by hand after the jigsawing. But that's why you make them, to test this out, that you don't go building it and then go, oh, that doesn't look right. So what curve do I pick? Again, maybe the top half of those doors would be the next step. And as I said, that is still more than the a modern car. You can see the curve from here to there, this sweep here. It might only need that little bit of more shallow. And at least that's an existing curve that's remaining. I'm not altering the top half, at least I hope not, of the window, and make a whole new sweep, set of sweeps, and see what that looks like. Even if it just brings it in an inch, even 3/4 an inch, 20 mil to 25 mil less there is probably all it needs. So, what am I doing in front of my garage? Probably won't be able to see, but all the way up to using one of the drop posts at the gate is a wire wrapped around my pencil as close to the tip as possible. And then I pulled it tight and then drew my radius for the sweep from one end of the body to the other, and I've gone over this about 4 or 5 times, and it's quite consistent. So providing you keep the pencil vertical or perpendicular to the surface, it's actually quite accurate, and it's more accurate than I had to use wire. It's plastic coated wire because there's no stretch. The problem I had when I tried to use even nylon string, that you could still get stretch out of it, so depending on, you know, how much tension you had on it, it would just wobble all over the place. Here, look at that, that's pretty good for half a dozen passes, and it's all within quite a tight band. So I'm pretty happy with that. But look at that radius. I wanted an inch less than what I had, and so I end up using this as the template basically that determines the shape of the doors and the cowl from one end of the vehicle right up to the rear wheel arch. Alright, I've run the tape measure out. 7.1 meters is the radius that I'm using for the body. That sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? So it's out of it. Actually, I'm not sure what it was before, but I know it was less than 20 feet anyway. So this is about 20, just a bit over 23 and a third, something like that. So I'm not sure how close it is to the shape of the upper door. Let's have a look. Yeah, look at that. Not bad, eh? Nice match. I don't know if you can see that or not. So, yeah, there you go. Speak out between all the tradies and everything coming over, because it's Friday and 4 o'clock, they're already on their way home. Alright, there you go. Hopefully that gives me the look that I'm looking for. from the radius difference. So what I end up with, just over 25 millimeters I ended up with, less in the middle than I had before, which is just under an inch, just on an inch. So yeah, that's good. That's exactly what I was hoping for. I'll cut that out as well as the negative radius, and see what we come up with, and see if that gives me the look we're after. Alright, just did a quick interest to see what the stock radius was, and quite surprisingly it's 5.2 or 1.9 meters shorter than what I've just made it. Shows you how much change you have to make when you're talking these distances to make just a 1 inch shallower sweep. I had to move, what, 6'2" further out from where I was. It's the length of me just to get a shallow radius. So alright, there you go. Right, what looks like a really shallow curve, once it's on the vehicle, it's quite surprising still how much curve it's got. So you can see the difference there between the old curve on the outside and the new one that I've just finished cutting. So this curve now lines up and ends up at the plumb bowl, which is the absolute minimum distance I can have here. By the time it comes up, I know I'm an inch or 25 mil out further because of the angle of the door, the camber in the door. So originally it still places the widest point at the B pillar. So it's coming out here and going back in again, rather than what it is stock, which is the widest point is here at the C pillar, and then it starts curving back. Because I've still got to be careful that I don't sort of run in through here too early. I want to preserve that corner up here where you can see there's a lot of structure. So I don't know if to go flatter overall, because I don't want to pull this out too far, because that would achieve the same thing if I just angled this outwards like that. You're moving the widest point back. It's about, quickly guessing, it's about halfway now between the B and C, but it starts getting very wide here, and then you're covering more and more of the running board, and I want that to be shown because it's going to be narrower than stock as it is. So I don't know, or I keep this curve up to the B pillar and then a shallow one only until we get to the C pillar before it curves in. So you have two curves along, which is nothing unusual. Even the Cherokee out there, there's a curve in the bonnet, and then it actually flattens out across the doors, and then it's actually got this curve from the C pillar towards right over the rear wheel. So it's got this curve as its biggest curve apart from the bonnet. Oddly, the bonnet curve actually matches what was there originally through here. So they're still using the same curves to this day. So yeah, I think definitely a step in the right direction. It's not too much, even extending that radius by another 6'2". So now I'll decide if to have two curves through there or one long shallower curve. Alright, I've decided to, with my wife, that staying with a single curve through the whole A to, well, D pillars, well, C pillars, it's the way to go. So I'm trying just something slightly shallower. I've run out of wire. I had to move to my other driveway, move the Cherokee out because And we'll see if this is enough. It's only really subtle. It's only the next minus 10 millimeters 3/8 in the radius. But otherwise I'm going to have to find some more wire. At it again, trying to get a literally different driveway going from that gate right along next side the Willies all the way up to the house, which leads into the workshop next to it. And so we're going to end up with just under 33 feet or just over 10 metres in radius to see if that will work. Alright, I've got the new sweep cut out, and I've been using an adjustable file, sometimes called a contour file, so when you either tighten or loosen this, it'll bow in one direction or the other to shoot the profile. So you do have to push down on them a little bit to set, because there's a little bit of flex until that file face there touches the backing. As long as you're aware of that when you're setting, you put the same amount of pressure as you would file, and then you can file along and it will keep the profile. So as you can see here, there's a tiny little low spot here and one right at the very end, but this is actually getting lopped off, so I'm not worried about that bit. But what I do check, visibly I couldn't see anything, but you tap it and here, notice the change? So there's a low spot there, and the other way you can do it is put a, that's going to show you can just see the light coming through there. There's probably half a mil, 20 thou gap there. And so what I'll do is I'll, where it sounds solid, I'll file that until it gets to the level of there, and then you should end up with a solid sound from one end to the other. So where it's hollow sound is low, where it's solid sounding is high. So I just take note of where the position is and then keep doing it a little bit more, because this will be my template also for doing the negative or the positive. This, when you're doing this one, you can't use that ruler technique, because you push that in, the ruler will conform, come out a little bit and then touch again. It won't form the whole way unless you sort of force it in with your hand. It's still good for checking, you know, if you've got a fair curve, as they call it, but it won't give you a true radius of, it'll just tell you if there's any, you know, particularly high or low spots. Where if you put it over like this, it's got no choice but to follow it when it's a single curve like that. So yep, I'll keep going there, perfect that, because that will be the template for the shape of the lower doors, and this will be for the rest of the doors, the other one. For just lifting up and down, this will get screwed to here, so I've got something visibly to work off. Alright, another step. So after all those changes of radius, this is what we've ended up with. So you can see it's still got a lot of curve, but I've been able to reduce the amount that this B pillar is sticking out. So this point here is still in exactly the same spot, but by flattening it out, I'm going to show more running board. Before it was nearly completely covered, and I think it was about 32 mil, something like that, which 1.25 inches, that I was able to move that in by altering the radius. And you can also see here I've got plenty more room before I come into the structure. Before it was aiming right into this corner here, and you've got to remember that also the body comes up in that curve, same curve as the grille, and so it will come in now through just behind here before it cuts around, leaving all that structure in place. So I've achieved what I wanted to do there. So the change of radius is amazing. The standard radius, which is actually what this one is in here, of the willies was on a 5.1 metre radius, which is 17 feet, and now it's on a 10 metre radius, or 33 feet. So another 16 foot of radius. That's that's a lot. Yet look how much curve that has got. That is really significant, and I think it better suits the stretch of the of this body. And so I show more running board and I keep more structure at the back. So I've achieved what I set out to do. Just doing a quick comparison here, you can see the outside of this piece here matches the new curve, but that inside is the original one from the willies. So you can see if it was the same length, obviously it would be showing more dramatic, but it's just over 32 mil. If you can imagine this going out and coming back in again, gives a good representation of the change in curve between the old and the new for the body. If you want to see it, here's the door, and if you can see what I mean, how this here matches perfectly what the doors are now. So I'm going to have to reduce all that. You see all that has to be stretched out along that edge there to be able to flatten that curve, and these will be made longer as well, but it still has to have an even curve. So all that area there, that lip that goes downwards has to be cut off. This whole edge there has to be stretched out as long, and this here has to actually be shrunk. So the outside of the curve will have to be shrunk to flatten out, and the inside here, just there, along that straight edge there, that's a straight edge, has to be pulled inwards. So that needs shrinking where the outside needs stretching to achieve the same thing. So it's a lot more work, but the end result is going to be worthwhile. Alright, I've been trying to show how the new sweep compares to a modern vehicle. This is a 2010 Jeep Cherokee KK, or Liberty in the States. But you can see there the amount of gap. So as you can see, it's still a lot more sweep than anything you would find today on the road, and this has probably got more sweep than the Donor 300, for instance. So it seems shallow initially when you compare it to what was stock, but really, look at that, there's still probably a 3/4 of an inch, 20 mil gap there, I would estimate.